ICQ Podcast episode 311, Pocket Electronic Workshop. Well, hello fellow amateur radio enthusiasts, and welcome to this, our 311th episode of the ICQ Amateur Ham Radio Podcast, supported by our monthly and annual subscription donors, and in this episode, Joey Ferguson, Whiskey 4 Juliet Foxtrot. In this episode, Martin M0MNG is joined by Leslie, Golf 0 Charlie India Bravo, Edmund, Mike 0 Mike November Golf, Dan, Kilo Bravo 6 November Uniform, and Ruth, Kilo Mike 4 Lima Alpha Oscar, to discuss the latest amateur ham radio news. Myself, Colin M6BOY, rounds up the news in brief, and this episode's feature is a feature regarding the Pocket Electronic Workshop. Well, as we keep mentioning, it's our donors that keep us advert free, and this episode we'd like to thank Joey Ferguson, Whiskey 4 Juliet Foxtrot. He set up a subscription donation, and that's wonderful. It gives a wonderful base to make sure we can pay our way. And Joey sent along a very kind note and said, "Hello to all the ICQ podcast team. I just wanted to say that I thought the feature in episode 310 was one of the best discussions I believe I've ever heard in my 45 years as a ham regarding the plight of the future of amateur radio. Martin did some outstanding work as he facilitated the discussion during the RSGB forum, and the comments were very interesting. I found of particular interest the idea of hubs instead of clubs, traditional club idea. Obviously, some in the audience didn't agree that clubs should be considered a barrier or a problem as they pointed out their successes. But I must say that the presenter of the hub idea really made me sit back and think about the concept and how a structure could be created and organised. All the audio sounded great, so thanks for that, Joe. That's work there by Martin Rothwell, in fairness to him, Mike 0 Sierra Golf Lee and myself there on the audio side, and Chris, Mike 0 TCH as well, joined Martin on the panel as well. Along the way. So he says, as usual, another fine episode of the ICQ podcast on the cutting edge of what everyone wants to hear. All the best 73s from Joe, Whiskey 4 Juliet Foxtrot from South Carolina. So Joe, thank you very much. Very kind note, wonderful donation. Thank you very much for setting up that subscription. Really do appreciate it. And to say that helps us keep the show advert free. If you appreciate the work we're doing and you see value in the ICQ podcast show, just do what Joe did and visit www.icqpodcast.com/donate, where say think about the value you got for the show, and pop that either into a one-off donation or set up a subscription donation. Pop it our way, and that helps us keep the show advert free. Well, now we join Martin, Leslie, Edmund, Dan and Ruth to discuss the latest amateur ham radio news, including QSO party in Europe and amateur radio long distance data network. As always, guys, hope you enjoy.
The ICQ Amateur Ham Radio Podcast, serving the amateur ham radio community fortnightly since 2008.
Well, hi guys and girls, welcome to episode 311 of the ICQ podcast and tonight's News Roundtable. Tonight I have Mr. Leslie Butterfield, who's as vocal as always, haven't you been, Leslie? Mr. Leslie Butterfield G0CIB.
Good evening, Michael. Me vocal? No, well, all right. Yeah, okay. I'll accept that one on the chin. Two things. First of all, this headset is still being tapered together with sticky back plastic, so it's sort of hanging off my head at the moment. And the other thing is, if our American listeners hear very, very carefully, they may hear fireworks going off in the background, because that was due to sort of a certain event yesterday, many hundred, I can't remember exactly when it happened, but anyway, November the 5th, so you probably hear the fireworks going off in the background.
Yeah, I can't understand, Leslie, why we celebrate a failed act of treason, but never mind.
Won't go into that.
No. And by the way, the name's Martin, not Michael or whatever you called me last time.
Oh, sorry, Martin.
Yeah, you're tired, I know. I've also got Mr. Edmund Spicer M0MNG. Hi, Edmund.
Hello, Martin. Hello, everybody.
Yeah, sorry on the Saturday, mate. I was really rushing against time, so good to see you. But it was only for about 30 seconds, wasn't it? But we'll catch up with you again soon at the Cat's Bazaar, I assume.
Yes, absolutely. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, great. Then we move to the other side of the pond where we have Mr. Dan Romanchik, KB6NU. Hi, Dan.
Hello, all.
Yeah, good to have you. And I know you didn't make the last one. We suffered some Google sharing issues with the document. I think it might be fixed, but it's been a bit of a nightmare. So that's why you didn't get all the information in time, Dan. We weren't cutting you out.
No worries.
Yeah, great. Last but not least, we have Ruth Willet, KM4LAO. Hi, Ruth.
Hello, it's good to be on.
Yeah, good to have you. And as I say, I know you've got a hard stop, so we're going to crack on because you've got a lecture to go to fairly soon. So we'll move on with it. Right, our first news story is an interesting one. AM Amateur Radio Europe announces an AM QSO party for 2020. Leslie, you got excited about it when you saw this, didn't you?
Yes, I did, Martin. I tell you what it's about. It's about getting all that equipment that's been stuck in the bottom of the cupboard, that's been collecting cobwebs and dust. And I looked at it and I thought, you know what? We can actually get some of that gear working. And I followed the link and I went on their Facebook page, and it looks really, really good. Some really good stuff they're doing. Anyway, it came up a little message. Have you got a call sign? I went, yes, I have, and popped in G0CIB. And within seconds, I was accepted. And I'm sort of just scrolling through it now. Really interesting stuff.
Yeah, well, sounds like you're going to have a go at it. So if you do, let us know. Edmund, are you an AM man, or have you used AM on amateur bands?
I have, but only very occasionally. I think I've had about 4 contacts in my life, all of them on 5317 kilohertz, which is the de facto AM frequency on the 60-meter band. Although I realise that that frequency falls outside of the walk allocation for Europe. I've also heard it down on 3615 on 80 metres, which is where is it VMARS, the Vintage Military Amateur Radio Society, hang out. And during very good conditions a year or two back, I have heard it on 29 megahertz, from 29 up to 29.1, including some transmissions from across the Atlantic. So the thing that sticks in my mind about AM is every time I've heard it, it sounds really, really nice to my ears. And I know that there are loads of really good reasons for not using AM, not least the fact that it's really inefficient compared to some of the modes that exist today. But the audio, if it's done right, the audio quality is superb. So I would encourage people to have a go at this. And if you join the Facebook group and look in the files section, there's a very comprehensive PDF in there that outlines AM centre of activity frequencies on every band from 160 metres right through to 10 metres. And there's also a PDF file in there that goes through how to set up your more recent solid state rig for AM, because if you only ever use it on SSB, there are likely to be some adjustments that you'll need to make, particularly involving the ALC, to get it sounding top drawer on AM. But having said all of that, yes, it's I would encourage everybody to have a go. And if I'm around, and if propagation is all right, then I will have a go. But I guess the lower bands are probably the places to try it, Martin. Back to you.
Yeah, sounds interesting. Now, I know that AM is a quite wide mode, and Dan, you operate on a quite narrow mode, don't you, with Morse? So what's your feelings on the AM?
Well, we've got plenty of. I think we got plenty of bandwidth now to accommodate this. And being a CW operator, I'm the last one to criticize the users of ancient modulation. But it's sort of a funny story. My last AM contact, I actually did make an AM contact, but this was back in 1972, And at that time, novices here in the U.S. were allowed to operate phone on 2 meters. And I purchased a Heathkit lunchbox and operated a little 2-meter AM.
Ah, that's giving the secrets away, isn't it, Dan? Dan was on 2 meters AM.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the first like antenna that I built myself too. I built a little halo antenna, and this is the absolute truth. I built this halo antenna from an old lawn chair that my parents had. I took the aluminum tubing and bent it into a circle and had a halo antenna.
Yeah, sounds great. And they were the days when Heathkit made stuff and you could get real good kits and do that sort of thing. But interesting. Ruth, are you like me and never done AM, or are you going to make me the only person who hasn't done AM?
Nope, I'll join you on that. I unfortunately have not been able to make any AM contacts yet, but it's definitely on my bucket list because it sounds like a really fun mode. And I mean, I've got a personal goal of trying to, make contacts using every single mode I can, since that's what we have for ham radio. But this event, it seems so cool. It seems like such a fun event, just getting to operate AM using a fun mix of vintage or modern equipment. And hopefully this event will draw other people to get on the air so you can actually make some contacts, which will be awesome. I was reading it and it made me happy. It sounded like the organizers found a good mix between, both pure contest style to accommodate those, as well as just encouraging people to make conversation on every single band so that really anybody who's interested can get on the air. So I'm definitely excited about this, and who knows, maybe I'll get to hear some folks on and make my first AM QSL myself.
Well, that'll be good. And that'll mean I'll have to do it as well, Ruth, if you do it. No problems. As I say, I quite fancy having a go on AM, so I might have a go at this. As I say, normally a rig, if it's a 100-watt rig, will do about 25 watts max on AM. So, could be fun. Could be fun to have a go at that. Moving on, our next news story. HackSpace magazine has an antenna article. Now, I was quite impressed with this because it was written by a foundation license holder, Joe Hinchcliffe, MW6CYK. Yeah, the interesting thing for me was that it's an amateur that's written an article in HackSpace magazine, and it's for an antenna for 686 megs, which is obviously well outside the amateur band, but it's still an amateur. Dan, what's your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, this is I have a 2-meter version of this in my book, 21 Things to Do After You Get Your Amateur Radio License. And it's great. Kind of a good first kind of project, and maybe it'll help a lot of hackers realize that a lot of the stuff they do is actually radio, all this wireless stuff.
Oh, yeah. I think it's great that, we're cross-fertilizing with the hackerspace. Ruth, have you any thoughts on this one?
Oh, yes. I'm definitely seems like a very good introduction to ham radio for the hacker community that may not know as much about it, but they may realize that, hey, we're doing this. It crosses interests. Definitely makes me happy when magazines like HackSpace are willing to print articles by hams. And reading it through, it sounds well written and should hopefully be understandable for all the readers, so maybe they can try it out. Personal note, I'm also very glad they included resources for like the Radio Society of Great Britain, or encouraging people to check out their local groups, since that's definitely the people who are going to have the personal impact on anybody who's interested in the hobby and can hopefully help them get more involved.
Yeah. I think it's 4 pages. It's 4 pages helping people to produce an antenna that make their projects work a lot better, but it gives amateur radio a good light. Edmund, your thoughts on this one?
Nothing to add, really, apart from the fact that I'm tempted possibly to follow this design and make it, because in the UK, if indeed not the whole of Europe, the 886 megahertz band is a low power license exempt band. I think they're known as ISM, Industrial, Scientific and Medical bands, but basically all kinds of license-free things can pop up there, a bit like at 433 megs. So I'm tempted to make one of these to see if I can pick up my my neighbours' cordless headphones so I can have a laugh at their taste in music or something like that. But apart from that, yeah, as people have said, it's a nice introduction to the art of antenna making for people who are non-radio amateurs, rather, who otherwise might not come across it.
Yeah, well, best of luck with building one. And let's ask Leslie. Leslie, you're an HF man, really, but what do you think?
Well, yeah, I do prefer HF. I've got to be honest. But what it does, first of all, it gets amateur radio out there, and I know what Hackaday does. They've got really lots of interesting projects. So what this does, it gets amateur radio out there, and it gets people building, and it gets solar smoke. I mentioned another podcast then, but hey, you know what I mean. It gets the solar smoke going, and also, person's written an article, foundation holder, great, because what will happen is those articles will improve and improve, and it'll look back and go, yeah, well, that's where it started, and that's, I've had articles that I did years ago. I remember doing one on solar panels, many, many years ago, but these things come back and people use them. They get in a book, oh, well, how do I do this? And people use that for a reference source. So, yeah, good on him.
Yeah. Well, I think we're all in agreement. This is interesting antenna design. It's one that most of us have seen before, but it's been used in a different way, which is great. Next news story, I kind of like this because once again, it's promoting amateur radio. It says that West Point cadets used amateur radio to contact the ISS. Now, I'm sure that the US military, if they wanted to contact the ISS, would be able to on all sorts of different frequencies and bits and pieces. But using amateur radio, I think that's really a good one. Ruth, do you want to go first? Because you do a lot of satellite stuff, don't you?
Yes, I absolutely love this story. It made me so happy to read it and hear about the West Point cadets getting to contact the ISS. Just colleges in general, just getting to talk to the ISS, especially such a storied one as West Point, is just thrilling. I'm glad that the cadets especially were able to make such a personal connection with a current astronaut who's also a West Point grad. And I'm really hopeful that this inspires them to, keep learning, keep doing all they can at school. Hopefully they'll stick with ham radio through West Point and definitely chase whatever their goals are. So yeah, definitely an awesome story. Love anything related to satellites and ISS particularly. And always happy to hear about other colleges that get to communicate with astronauts.
Yeah, that's good. Edmund, what's your thoughts on this one?
If you want to get anybody interested in amateur radio, do something that involves the International Space Station. That is the number one method. And on my YouTube channel, for example, the videos that stand head and shoulders above all the others in terms of views are the ones that involve the International Space Station. When we had Tim Peake up there a couple of years back, I did a few videos, and they have probably got more views than everything else on my YouTube channel put together. So the fact that they were able to work somebody on the International Space Station rather than merely just receiving slow scan TV, for example, which is what I tend to do most of the time these days. That is it, really, isn't it, in terms of promotion of ham radio and getting people enthused. So I agree with you, Martin. It's a really good story, and if anybody listening to this wants to enthuse or encourage their friends or relatives into amateur radio by hook or by crook, then doing something that involves the International Space Station would be my recommendation. Maybe I think the Digipeater is active at the moment, isn't it? So maybe bouncing some APRS through it or something like that would be a good advert for amateur radio.
Yeah, as I say, it's very interesting. Leslie, you were in the military. Would you have loved to have done that?
Oh, that was many years ago. Oh, that's a long, long time ago. Yes, I was. The thing is about this story, and I take a slightly different slant on it, is that when people are they've been put in for a particular trade or whatever, and they go to we would call them trade boards. I'm sure they've got an equivalent phrase. So they go to their trade boards and they're learning about their trade and electronics and communication and all that stuff. What something like this does is it brings it to life, and all of a sudden it's not learning by viewfoil or that goes back a long while, or PowerPoint presentation. It's learning by doing. And once people have got that, I've got a guy at work at the moment. He's interested in the hobby, and I'm telling him what it does, and it's got a little radio. And I said, but there's one thing: if you catch this hobby, I cannot cure you. That's it. And we laughed. So yeah, it's all about infusing people, and that's not learning as such. It becomes pleasurable to look. The time just flies when you're learning about this stuff because the interest is there. Does that all make sense?
Certainly does. And as I say, you mentioned the Solar Smoke podcast earlier. Bill Meara, who I have interviewed, a real nice guy, he has a thing, he says, he calls it the knack. Once you've got the knack, once you've bitten the bug, you've got the knack, and you're hook, line, and sinkered. So, yeah, great. Dan, what's your thoughts on this one?
Well, I guess I'm surprised, and now that I think about it, that not many more colleges have contacted the International Space Station. You think that a few of them would sneak into the schedule somehow?
Yeah, I suppose, but it's an effort, isn't it? It's not an easy thing to do. And normally they're set up months in advance. But yeah, I would be surprised that others wouldn't want to get involved.
Yeah. I should. Ruth, you might think about trying to set one up there.
Definitely thought about it. Just trying to figure out who would help us with it and all the paperwork. But yeah, it's definitely it's on the radar. We'll see if it happens.
Yeah, and you could invite like local school kids too, but it would be the Kettering University sort of the sponsor of it.
Well, there you go. There you go. Let's put out a request. If Ruth tries to set this up, there must be enough ICQ listeners in the States to be able to either find a club or go or enough amateurs in that area to help. So, Ruth, you become the project manager.
All right, I'll see what I can do.
Yeah,
I wouldn't use the term project manager. I would say arm twister.
You would. Yeah. Ruth, if I've stitched you up on this, I apologise. But yeah, if you want to do it, let's just try and get it moving for you, and let's see how they go. That'll be a good one. Next news story. Once again, I like this. It's not the massive new technology, but building a long-distance data network using ham radio. And we've heard about the guys who do the mesh networks, and that's very, very good. But this is on 70 SEMS. Dan, you said that this would be of interest to somebody like yourself.
Right. And the reason this is a good item to talk about is it's appropriate technology. And I'll give you an example. Here in Ann Arbor, we're trying to actually set up an Arden network. But where I am, my personal location, there's no way I could ever access this network because I'm downhill and sort of hidden away from any of the nodes that will be even the nodes that'll be up on the repeater sites. But I could probably do it at 400 megahertz. It depends how the signal bounces around. I can access the repeaters, the 440 repeaters, but I wouldn't be able to do the line of sight that Arden requires. So for me, this would be a great project.
Yeah, and in fairness, fair number of 70 SEMS transceivers, both new and second-hand market, possibly PMR, that would make this very cost interesting, I would suggest.
Well, I'd use the 440 radio I have, the 440 FM radio that I currently have. That's useless because we put up a DMR repeater on that frequency.
Yeah,
so it'd be a good way to repurpose that radio.
Certainly would. Edmund, I know this is not our side of the pond, but what's your thoughts on this?
It's all a little bit over my head, to be honest, Martin, but it's nice to hear about something that generates activity on 70 centimetres, which is a really, really nice band. And I dare say somewhat underused, because if you want to get some height for your antenna, you can get an awful lot of gain out of a relatively small antenna footprint. So if it brings activity to the band, that's good. But in terms of the actual technology itself, it's not something I've ever been involved with or really know about, Martin. So I'm afraid I can't wax lyrical on this one.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's kind of like a kind of like an internet connection, probably useful for sending slow data like emails and things like that, Edmund. But you wouldn't stream video over it or something like that. But certainly for passing information, it could be very, very good. Leslie, have you any thoughts on this one?
Well, I'm not really a data person, unless it sounds like Donald Duck, with snap, crackle and pop, But I do agree with the point about using UHF. It is so important doesn't matter which side of the pond, which country, it's about getting that band up and running and using properly. It's an underused resource, people. And if I'm going to bang the table on that, I will. The other thing is about PMR equipment. There's plenty of it going out there, and for the specification of what the kit can do, it's as cheap as chips at the moment.
Yeah, it certainly is, mate. Certainly is. Right, moving on to our next news story. The FCC has been asked to clarify amateur rules governing encryption or encoding messages. Now, we've talked a lot around this subject, but suddenly somebody's put the problem back on the FCC, haven't they, Dan?
Yeah, this is a new wrinkle on it, and I have to applaud this guy's tenacity on this. Of course, he's from New York, and the people from New York are known to be on the tenacious side. But the wrinkle in this story now is that Rappaport, N9NB, I think is his call sign, has asked the FCC to clarify the rule. And I tell you the truth, this is the first time I've heard of a petition for declaratory ruling on anything. And so now the onus is going to be on the FCC to clarify that rule. Here's a case where the rule maybe was bent a little bit, and now calling on the FCC to finally make a final decision on it.
Well, let's hope they kind of make that decision sensibly. They may actually look into it and go, well, we're still archaic compared with the rest of the world, and move on and give you guys lots more. So let's hope they look at it sensibly. Ruth, what's your thoughts on this one?
I think it's very interesting. I definitely agree. It's always a good thing to clarify the rules to ensure that they're accurate. Personally, I think it's interesting it's pushed by this ham who's at NYU. Again, it's another amateurs at a college promoting the hobby, and both trying to do what's best for the hobby, but also hopefully encouraging their students to think outside the box and see the practical uses that ham radio has in the communication. Just, he had to figure out how to approach the FCC to ask them to clarify it and whatnot. So I think it's very interesting and something to keep an eye on and see what happens.
Yeah, well, I'm looking forward to, seeing what this gets really clarified out, because I come over to the States every now and again. Well, I've been once, and I'm coming in 2020. So, I might want to do some of these data modes, and it would be nice to have it clarified so that I don't get into trouble. So there you go. Edmund, I know this is not our side of the pond, but what's your thoughts on this one?
Well, again, it's kind of all gone a bit over my head, if I'm honest, Martin, so that I can't think of anything sensible to say, so I'll duck out on this one if you don't mind.
Okay, well, what it is that in the States, they operate on a symbol rate, how many characters you can push through, whereas we operate on a bandwidth. We set the maximum bandwidth for the signal, as I understand it, so that's kind of where they're going on this one, and they're looking for clarification because with encryption or encoding messages, they're trying to get the signal through.
Well, that's actually only part of it. Okay, that's part of the issue. What they're really asking for here is to clarify the rule that amateur radio transmissions must be open and transparent, because some of the digital modes, notably WinLink, you can't really listen in on a WinLink contact like you can with almost all the other ones, as far as I know, amateur radio communications, because the two stations set up the link and only they can participate in it, if that makes any sense, right? So like when one station sends something and the other station doesn't receive it, it asks for repeats. Well, if a third station was trying to listen in, it can't ask for a repeat if it didn't get all of the proper information. So that's what's going on here, more so than the symbol rate issue, in my opinion.
Yeah, right.
That if that makes any more sense.
Yeah, it's a cloudy issue, and I've heard a fair amount about it, and it is quite a clouded issue, which would be nice if it does actually get sorted.
Yeah.
And we get a definitive answer. Leslie, have you any thoughts on this one?
Oh, can I put the cat amongst the pigeons on this one?
You usually do.
Right. I think we're looking at it as engineers, and I know there's a scientist here, and when you're writing rules, you want them to mean anything you like, depending upon the circumstances. Are you with me on this?
Yeah, I'm listening to you.
And they may not want to clarify it because they've actually closed the door to something tomorrow. Oh no, we want this as fuzzy as possible so we can interpret things the way we look. I know we love things to be precise, but sometimes you have to be unprecise.
Yeah, but and if that's their final ruling, well, everybody's going to have to live with it. But this guy Rappaport, he points out a few possible problems with doing it that way, and if the FCC decides they want to be ambiguous on it, well, then we'll have to live with the consequences.
Yeah, I remember in this country when we had the arguments over the stroke M, stroke P, and it was dreadful, and I can't explain how excruciating that was, and I just, it means whatever you want it to mean.
Okay.
Yeah, but the rules are...
I have put the cat amongst the pigeons, haven't I?
Yeah, slightly, but I mean, at the end of the day, rules are rules, and we should, wherever possible, not break the rules. If you break the rules in ignorance...
Oh, no, I'm not saying break the rules at all. What I'm saying is interpret them, and that's fair game.
Well, I'll give you an example. I read the whole thing, by the way, so I'll give you an example he gives. He says that under the current scheme, people can send business-related emails via WinLink, and nobody would be able to catch that and not... tell the users not to do that anymore. Well, so they're using an ambiguous situation to really break the rules, which is not to use amateur radio for any pecuniary interest.
Mm.
So see, it gets deeper than just is this really encoding or not, or encryption or not. So that that's the issue here, and that's not even to say being able to use amateur radio such as WinLink for even more nefarious purposes.
Yeah, it's an awkward.
I'm looking forward to this with interest, because I've got a big smile on my face because I can see both sides here,
Oh yeah, and I've actually been one to have written saying that we should allow some amount of encryption, at least somewhere on an experimental basis, because hey, that's it's an experimental thing, and all our wireless now is encrypted, so amateur radio operators should be at least allowed to do some amount of encryption for experimental purposes. But I think the guy's got a point in the case of WinLink.
You talk about encryption and that sort of thing. and this side of the pond, we're not allowed to encrypt either. But there was an interesting discussion by Kamel at one of the board members of RSGB that Chris Howard and I went to at the RSGB convention. And he was saying that for us to get back on level terms and our hobby to become mainstream again, we kind of need to move with the times. And we have all this bandwidth and we have all these clever people that do all sorts of bits and pieces. And if we could take on some of these projects and play with them, you know, and start to understand encryption and this sort of thing, we become a useful part of society rather than just a hobby. And in the past, amateurs have done phenomenal work. I mean, the mobile phone, for argument's sake, APRS. I mean, just about every vehicle manufacturer has talked to me about vehicle tracking, and I say APRS, and they look sheepish and go, yeah, it's like that, isn't it? So we've done lots of things in the past. I think probably we need to now start looking at opening up, not everywhere, but maybe a set band where we experiment with encryption and we experiment with this stuff. Because after all, our hobby's about experimenting and learning.
Yeah, no, I'm totally with you on that. But I'm also with this guy in this particular case. You know, so the rule would be changed to say, okay, you know, you can use encryption methods, you know, on some portion of the 900 megahertz band or wherever, you know, wherever we deem it. But, you know, maybe the rule has to be written such that, well, okay, if you're using encryption and we ask you to show us your work, you have to show us your work, or, you know, something like that. So the openness and transparency would still be there. But in this case, using this mode, the openness and transparency isn't there. And that's what N9NB is talking about.
Well, there's another one, Dan, in that the monitoring services, both sides of the pond, that listen into most RF traffic, if they can't decode the encryption we're using, then that makes them a little bit blind to what's going on.
Well, right, and that's all part of this. But and how much of a problem that is, well, I don't really know, but it could be a problem.
Yeah, it could be a problem because we could set up a encryption. You and I could be plotting to take over the world, sort of thing. You know. Let's
not go there, Martin.
But yeah, you know what I mean.
We could be planning to take over the FCC. How's that?
Yeah, that'll do. No, we're not, and that's fine. But in fairness, I think if you're doing encryption because you're testing it, you should publish the algorithms so that anybody can decode it.
I think the thing is, Martin, that regardless of our own personal views, is that technology is changing and it's presenting these difficulties and these things to be overcome. And where this is going to go, I honestly don't know. But, you know, like I said, technology is changing and these things are going to be looked at, whether it's encryption on amateur radio, encryption on WhatsApp, or and it does pose difficulties at the moment.
Certainly does. But anyway, I think it's interesting, Dan, and I thank you for putting this one forward. I looked at it and thought, oh, this one could be a can of worms, but fine, not a problem. We shouldn't shy away from this, and thank you for putting it forward because I think it's been an interesting discussion.
Yeah, thank you, Dan.
We'll keep an eye on the issue, you know.
Yeah. I'm sure this will run for the rest of the year, if not longer.
Yeah.
But that'll be good. Okay, well, that concludes the news stories for tonight. And I'm now going to ask the guys what they've been up to amateur radio-wise. So go on, Dan. You go first.
Well, so I did something kind of amusing over the last week or so. I actually built it was at my actual first surface mount board, but my first surface mount board with really tiny components. And you know what? It turned out to be not as difficult as I thought. I bought this kit. This kit is a little SI 5351, he calls it a breakout board. It's has a little digital synthesizer on it. It has 3 outputs, and there's 17 surface mount components on it. And I actually bought this kit like 2 years ago, and I just had it in my box, and I keep thinking about it every once in a while. Oh yeah, I should pull it out and really learn how to do this. Well, something happened, and I actually did pull it out and built it. And again, it turned out not to be as difficult as I thought. And now I'm the proud owner of a little surface mount synthesizer board.
Yeah, they're very good, those little boards. I think they can do from HF up to about 160 megs, can't they, Dan?
8 kilohertz to 160 megahertz, yeah.
Yeah. And it's an interesting little chip. But
Dan, just a quick question: was it one of those where you use the paste and then put it in the microwave?
No, I did each part individually because there are only 17 of them, so I did each part individually.
Okay.
And only one of the SI5351 IC is the only one with really fine pitch leads, and that was interesting because what the guy said to do was to solder it and not worry about any solder bridges, and then take some solder braid and heat up up all the pins simultaneously, which I could do with the soldering iron I had, and then the solder wicked up the solder between the pins, and yet left it soldered to the board, and that worked great.
Yeah, Leslie, it won't be a microwave; it has to be a proper oven. But yes,
that's right. Toaster oven is what they usually use.
Yeah.
Yeah, but no. So I mean, I'm geeked about this now. I'm thinking of something the next thing I can build.
Yeah, as I say, sounds interesting. So I've got one of those little ICs in my BitX 40. There's a little board on it that does the VFO on there, and that works very well. So yeah, I know what you mean, Dan. Right, go on then, Leslie. What have you been up to? Who have you been terrorising?
No. Me, no. What? As you probably realise, we did we've been doing some work on some cabling, testing on that, and the other bits we've been doing is working on the club antenna, trying to get that right, and having discussions what we're going to use. And no, this isn't working. So that's all been going on at the moment, and you can imagine the fun and games we're having on that. The other thing I've got, where is it? And I've literally just popped in the post today. I've got a new book on power supplies, and it's landed on my desk yesterday, and that's going to be my new reading material for next time.
That sounds good. And I'm been dropping hints that I want a book for Christmas, so hopefully Mrs. B's been listening. I would rather hope she has. But yeah, I know what you mean. Edmund, I know I only saw you for about 30 seconds, so that really probably doesn't count as much of a contact, but what have you been up to?
That would be a very short contact by my standards if it happened on the air, yeah. Really, the only thing I've done recently is Jota Jamboree on the air on the third weekend in October, and that went really well. The bands were in good shape, and because we're at the very bottom of the sunspot cycle and heading into the depths of winter, 80 metres stayed open all day, and there was inter-G contacts on 80 and 40 metres as well. So because of where we are sunspot cycle wise and season wise, if you can get an antenna up for 80 metres, that's possibly the HF band to spend a bit of time on in the months ahead.
Right, so sounds like it's fun. So, Ruth, what have you been up to in amateur radio since the last time you joined us on the podcast?
I've been keeping very busy for sure. I'm back at school, so now in my 4th year at Kettering, studying engineering physics and mechanical engineering, now with a minor in acoustics, which is fun. Wise, I've been working with the school club here, the amateur radio club here at school, promoting the hobby. I hope getting more students involved and active. We were actually on the air last month for the ARRL School Club Roundup. Some alumni came up. They're so excited that the club is back active again. And they brought up a ham van that's a repurposed weather van with a full station in it that we were able to operate from portably. This allowed us to be out and visible to the entire student body. And it worked out great, got a lot of interest from students, and got some new people on the air for the first time under the club call, Kilo 8 Hotel Papa Sierra. So that was very fun. And then personally, I've also been scouting out new places on campus to do satellite passes. I'm living in a new location around school this year, so I've been having fun seeing new places, figuring out which parking lot I want to do a satellite pass from. So I've been keeping busy and having fun.
Well, sounds like you've been doing a lot and a lot going on there. It sounds like a lot of fun, Ruth. So that's really, really good. Well, I didn't do JOTA this year. We wanted to do it as a club, but the scout troop we are aligned with didn't want to do JOTA this year. It's a real shame. But we took the opportunity, Chris and I. We did a foundation course in the UK. We had 6 people take the exam. I'm pleased to say every one of them passed. Unfortunately, none of them got 100%, and that was probably down to me personally. Because up until now, and it was always said that we would never have the same type of questions as the guys in the States have, where they ask a question and one of the answers is all of the above. And the UK's never gone down that route. And the new syllabus has got a question, at least one question in, which was all of the above. So well, the guys came out.
No.
The guys came out and said, "You told us it would never be one, and it's not in. And if it's that, it's wrong." Oh, damn it!
So it was the right answer this time, huh?
So anyway, but I'm pleased to say they all passed with good marks anyway. So that was good fun. And this week gone, we had an inter-club quiz in the local area, 3 clubs. We put 2 teams in, and we came second and third, so we were quite happy with that. And usually the person who wins it hosts it the next year, but for some reason they decided we should host it because we've never seemed to have won it. So we hosted it the first year, but we're going to host it next year, which is good fun. Did spend some time with an amateur that moved out of the area, the club, on Saturday. It was horrendous weather driving down to where he lives, but had a great chat with him. And just generally been busy with podcasting work. So not as much amateur radio stuff as you guys, but at least I have been doing something. Right, well, I'd like to thank each and every one of you for joining me tonight. I'd like to thank Mr. Leslie Butterfield G0CIB.
Oh, it's been fun always, and there's me trying to stir things up, Martin. I did behave. I did behave myself.
I know you did, and we have a bit of fun. And if we don't have fun, mate, it's interesting. I'll tell you something else later, but it's not relevant for on air, but it's a bit of fun. I'd like to thank Mr. Edmund Spicer M0MNG.
Thanks for having me on, Martin. 7-3.
Yeah, 73, mate. We'll catch you soon. Mr. Dan Romanchik over there in the States, KB6NU. Thanks for joining us, Dan.
My pleasure as always.
Yeah, and thanks for having the nice news story at the end that got us really going. That was a good one. And I'd like to thank Ruth Willet, KM4LAO, who unfortunately had a hard stop and had to disappear just at the end. So we'll catch up with Ruth again in a few weeks' time, but she's gone off to a lecture at college, so that's great. So I'm going to say 7-3, guys, and we'll continue with the rest of the podcast.
Cheerio.
7-3.
7-3.
And now it's time to have a look at the news in brief from me, Colin M6BOY. We start with news here about a new beacon being available. It's a new CW FT8 2-meter beacon, and it's on the air in Hot Springs, Arkansas, using the RF0 board, and its frequency is 144.275 MHz. It's using a 5-watt PA brick into a halo antenna at 750 feet above and 550 feet average terrain. Reports have been received from 275 miles out, have come in with no enhancements. So certainly good news there. So if you're in that Arkansas Hot Spring area, a new beacon on the air for you to try out. The IARU have voted to admit 2 new countries into their fold, their member societies, from Saudi Arabia, the Saudi Arabian Amateur Radio Club, the SRS, and the Seychelles Amateur Radio Club, the SARA, to their membership. So the Saudi group was founded in 2018 in June and is legally registered, recognised to represent the amateurs of Saudi Arabia. As of January this year, there were 66 members out of a total 479 licensed amateur radios operators in the country. So they've got a little bit of work to probably get everybody on board, but at least they're moving in the right direction. The Seychelles group, they a little bit younger. They were founded in December 2018, registered with the Seychelles government later that month. They've got 6 members at the moment, but they believe that they're going to be increasing those numbers very soon. So Saudi Arabia and Seychelles are located in ICQ Region 1, which corresponds with the IARU Region 1, and their membership becomes effective since October this year. So good news there. Those guys are coming on board. A little bit of a consumer radio news story here. In Ireland, Radio Telefís Éireann, or RTE, their digital service stations RTE2XM, RTE Pulse, RTE Gold, RTE Junior Radio and RTE Radio 1 Extra are going to cease to operate. This is following on from a major news report this week in Ireland that RTE have a budgetary hole, probably of around about 60 million euros, which they're going to need to plug along, not only with cutting services but also cutting jobs and pay restraints to ease its financial crisis. So we'll put links to this on the ICQ podcast webpage for you to check out. Interestingly, many people here in Ireland I spoke to about these closures didn't even realise these radio stations even existed. So they were paying for them as part of the licence fee, but didn't even know they were there to be enjoyed. So maybe that might be some of the reasons well for their closure. Well, now we're going to head over to our features episode, which is an interesting feature from Martin regarding a pocket electronic workshop. I hope you enjoy.
And now what you've all been waiting for, this episode's feature from the ICQ podcast. Hi guys, for this episode's feature, I wanted to tell you about the Digilink Analog Discovery 2. The Digilink Analog Discovery 2 is a device that I pretty much say is an electronics workshop that you can fit in your pocket. Why do I say that? Well, in many ways, we've seen very small oscilloscopes and scopes that connect to the PC. But this is much, much more than that. And in many ways, I'm hoping I'm going to do this justice. Because although I've had this sitting around now for the best part of 6 months, every time I've used it, I've really enjoyed what I've done. However, I don't think I've actually scratched the surface yet. So I'm going to tell you what I think, and then you can obviously tell me if I got it right. So it's a device that connects a USB cable to a computer, and once you've got that connected, you can then do a number of things. Now, I think the device is ideal for students or a small workshop if you haven't got a lot of room. But as I said, the device will fit in your pocket. You run a piece of software on your computer. Now, the software is available for Macs, Linux and Windows, so there's no excuse. That covers pretty much 99% of all computers that are going to be out there that you may wish to run this software on. Now, what I would suggest is, before you rush out and buy, why not just download the software? The software is called Waveform. And it's an interesting piece of software because it really does give you the opportunity to see what you can and can't do, even before you've got the device connected. And you can run it in demo mode and simulate whatever the thing you're trying to test. So, you might actually find that that will make up your mind. Now, what can this thing do? Well, it can be an oscilloscope. Okay, nothing special about that. But this is a 2-channel oscilloscope that can have a bandwidth of up to 30 megs. So that's more than sufficient for most of the things we do in amateur radio. And it does require a little add-on board, but the add-on board comes with the kit anyway, so not too much of a problem there. If you don't use the analog board, then I think you've got a maximum of about 9 meg bandwidth. But all in all, it's quite an interesting digital oscilloscope, and you can obviously do all your measurements and the maths and that sort of thing. And when I've used the oscilloscope and shown others, they were very, very impressed with it. So what else can it do? Well, it's got an arbitrary waveform generator, and this waveform generator is a 2-channel waveform generator. You can produce all sorts of waveforms from sine wave, square wave, triangular wave, flyback waves, sawtooth waves, all those sort of things. And you can actually output the whole thing into an audio jack if you want on the device. So you could actually use it to feed something else that is going to plug straight into a 3.5mm stereo jack. Once again, you can test all this out effectively. Apart from getting sound out of it, you can test all the software out and see if it's something that actually interests you. Moving on, the next thing it can do, well, it's got a programmable power supply, which is quite interesting. They don't expect to be able to run your rig or anything like that off it. If you're just doing a small test, then it's pretty useful. You can get a maximum current of 700 milliamps out of each channel, and the voltage is between half a volt and 5 volts, plus or negative. So you can have plus or negative 5 volts and anything between that. So very useful if you're doing something on the breadboard and you only want your very, very low current, say 1 or 2 transistors or discrete components or whatever. You should be able to power it from this without rushing out and getting your power supply out. Now, the other thing it will do is you could have 2 digital voltmeters. Now, basically, they use the same wires out of the device as the oscilloscope. So you can either have 2 voltmeters or 2-channel oscilloscope. But the 2 voltmeters you can hook up and it'll record in real time for you and show you what's going on. Data logger, there's something else that this will do. I've not scratched the surface with a data logger, but you can do a data logger with it. A logic analyzer, and this allows you to look at various samples and determine what's going on. There's a pattern generator, which is also interesting. Another thing is a static I/O, which allows you to see what's going on, say on a Arduino or a bus. And let's face it, although I haven't actually managed to use it in this mode at this point in time, and purely because I've been busy, there's a lot of us now moving over into Arduino-based or digital-based technology, and we will want to be able to see what's going on. The spectrum analyzer, there is a spectrum analyzer on it, and it uses the 2-channel scope, the input, and it has a frequency range from 0 Hz to 50 megahertz. So maybe not the biggest spectrum analyzer, but certainly for HF or audio or seeing what's going on, a very, very useful spectrum analyzer. And moving down, there's a network analyzer to work out what is happening when you use the oscilloscope and the waveform generator inputs and outputs to set that up. You can also do impedance analyzing, and it will actually do impedance analyzing. So if you've got an LC circuit and you want to know what its resonant frequency is or what the impedance of a device is, you can do it with this little box. Now there is an extra board you can get, which is about $20, just over $20, which just brings some of the wires out and makes it easier for you to connect the devices under test. However, you can still do it with the fly leads and make a good connection. Almost at the end, there's a protocol analyzer, which allows you, if you're doing any work in the digital mode, with a Raspberry Pi or something like that, you can actually look at the UART, the SPI bus, I2C bus, or the CAN bus, and it will show you what's happening on there at the time. Now, one last thing it will do is it allows you to write scripts. So if you're a programmer and you can program in JavaScript, you can pretty much script this device to do whatever you need it to do. Now, that comes on to the documentation. All the documentation appears to be online. Nothing wrong with that. The documentation is absolutely excellent. It has allowed me to understand what's going on. Along with, there are some really, really good YouTube videos by DigiLink themselves, and a lovely lady called Caitlin has done the videos to explain how all these things work. So a lot of support for a device that can do a hell of a lot. And my only concern is that I haven't had enough time to really dig deep enough into this yet to make sure that it does all the things I want. But first impressions are quite good. Now, I believe you can get this device for around about £250 UK if you shop around. Probably about the same in dollars in the States. It's certainly something that if I was sending a offspring of mine, a harmonic of mine, off to college and they were doing electronics, one of these with their laptop literally gives them a full electronics lab in their dorm to be able to play and do all the bits and pieces and test what the lecturers told them. The other thing is, where I see it as an advantage, is for somebody who hasn't got a massive workshop, you don't have to have a massive amount of space to be able to do all these things. You can do it on your computer. You could have a laptop. As I say, it runs under the 3 operating systems of Linux, Apple and Windows, and allow you to do lots of tests and experiments yourself. So I hope I haven't done this an injustice. I really like it, and I'm sure that a number of you will go and have a look on the YouTube and on the DigiLink site. But equally, my suggestion is, first off, if you're thinking about doing it, go and have a look at the software waveforms, which is downloadable off the DigiLink site, and you'll be able to get a feel for how it works. And as I say, it wasn't too difficult. I don't own a Mac, but I've actually installed the software under Windows and Linux, and both work well, and it's well documented. So I hope this has been of interest to you.
The ICQ podcast. Come for a moment. Stay for an hour.
Well done. I'm sure all the kit builders out there and the people who love tinkering away with building circuits and fixings will really enjoy your feature there. And so certainly check out the Digent product, and if it's of use to you, feel free to check it out. Right, nice piece of feedback came in the other day from Ken, WN8 Yankee, and he says, hi guys, I just want to let us know the format is good. He said no other podcast has the take on the format, so you guys are making it work for you. The roundtable is unique, keeping one person from dominance of a vision, format, direction of their own personal rantings. Which just about happens since we're all driven about something, or they would not be driven to be there in the first place. Equipment review is always very good. Looks like most of yours are on the video podcast. Handfest reviews, interviews are always also very good. Please continue to promote the hobby for more youth and women involvement. There are more women on, as I've heard recently, on the CQ WWSSB 48-hour contest. I'm certainly seeing more ladies about that. I'm sure you'd agree with me too. There seems to be more ladies about now in the hobby, and they're certainly becoming more vocal in their own right. So thanks for no politics. We have ham humour, whatever this is. I say we're not quite sure either. We just think it's misbehaving little boys, but we'll see how it is. I was just trying to keep up with other podcasts, but it seems most do not last in the single man format. Certainly it's tricky. I'd say, I suppose one of the success of ICQ is we've got a lovely team of guys that work with us and help us produce the show, and certainly take some of that burden off us. You'll always need the MP3 format. Don't worry about it, Ken. We're never moving away from an audio show, so you always get the MP3 format. He copies those to a USB drive for use in his work truck and his personal vehicle. So he says, regards and good luck in the contesting, Dad. Hi. So that's from Ken in Jackson, Tennessee in the USA. So good bit of feedback there from Ken, and much appreciated, isn't it?
Certainly is, Colin. Certainly is. And thanks, Ken, for all your kind words. And yeah, we've now got Ruth on board with us, and obviously she'll find her feet a bit more, but she's quite vocal, which is good. And I'm at the risk of taking about 50 million email letters. We've tried a number of times to get a lady presenter on this podcast, and what's always happened in the past is they've had a husband standing behind them, almost telling them what they can and can't say. But it's actually really refreshing with Ruth, because she is her own person, and she hasn't got that baggage yet, and hopefully never will have. Well, not the husband, but the somebody telling her what to do. And she'll develop with us as we go forward, I think, Colin.
Yes, certainly so. We might be able to teach her some of our British ham humour as well, which would be quite good, wouldn't it? But there you go.
Yeah, well, Leslie was trying to do that the other day, but in the pre-show chat, Leslie was trying to teach her British humour. He said the UK has 2 seasons, not 4. He said it's warm rain and cold rain.
And in Ireland we got about 4 versions of rain. I think it's horizontal, cold and wet, cold and windy, and got some other one as well. There's a T-shirt I can't remember off the top of my head, but there you go. You know what we should do on our next visit to the States? We should take with us some cream eggs and do some tests of dunking cream eggs into tea, and take that cultural experience over with us. So we'll have to put that on the list of things to do next time we're in the States. We need to thank our donors episode, Joey Ferguson, Whiskey for Juliet Foxtrot. Joey kindly set up a annual subscription donation. These are vital for helping us pay our way and our bills, etc., and keeping the show advert free. So if you've found value in what you've listened to in today's show, please do what Joey did by visiting www.icqpodcast.com/donate, where they say whatever you value the show, make that into a donation, and be it a one-off or a subscription donation, pop it our way. And say that will keep us advert free here in the audio show. As always, check out ICQpodcast.com for the news, links, information that you need over the next fortnight's time. You can keep in touch with us on Twitter as well, at Colin Butler and at M1MRB for Martin. And there's also the ICQ Facebook group there as well for you to keep touch with. We need to thank Leslie, Golf Zero, Charlie, India Bravo, Edmund, Mike Zero, Mike November Golf, Dan, KB6, November Uniform, and Ruth, Kilo Mike 4, Lima Alpha Oscar, for taking part in the News Round Table. If you haven't caught up with the video we done at RSGB Convention where we spoke about grow, merge or disband your amateur radio club, do check it out. It's on our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/ICQ podcast. And also have a little dig through the search functions on the website there, because Richard's article is also now published on ICQpodcast.com as well. So worthwhile checking out that as well for now. So before we wrap things up, Dad, anything else to add from your side of things? I don't know if you mentioned this earlier on in the round table yet, but Cat's Bazaar's coming up soon, isn't it?
Yeah, Cat's Bazaar's coming up, Colin, and we're looking forward to that, the boys and I. It's probably our last official ICQ outing this year. We're going to be at the Coulson Amateur Transmitting Society's Cat Bazaar on the 24th of November this year. Doors open at 10 o'clock, close at 2 o'clock. It'll cost you £1.50 to get in, and they'll give you a cup of tea or coffee included in the price. So, great venue. We ought to put the details up on our website, because I haven't got them in front of me at the moment, Colin. But anybody who's looking for that, just look for Coulson Amateur Transmitting Society, and then off their website, just look for Bazaar. And if you live in the south of England, well, not only the south of England, but we'll be there, and just enjoying the show, because there won't be any big dealers there. It'll be kind of an interesting rally, and it's very much a social event of the year for a lot of people in South London. Next thing on my list, we have had a fair amount of feedback. I've seen it on Facebook. The last video we did on the Grow, Merge and Disband Your Club, it was meant for discussion, and I've had some good feedback from a lot of people. I've had some, I'm not going to mention everybody, but we have had some good feedback, and we'll say thank you very much for all of your feedback. It was designed to generate and stimulate discussion. There is no one size fits all, and hopefully some of you got something out of it. The one thing I would have loved to have caught more on video was the fact that there were a lot of people nodding in agreement in the audience. So you heard people who were vocal. What unfortunately you didn't see was a lot of nodding heads in agreement a lot of the time. I think that's fair, isn't it, Colin?
Yeah, I suppose I should apologise. I was too busy trying to make sure you were kept under control. I should have panned the camera a bit more around the audience, shouldn't I? But as you say, I think that was probably more interestingly speaking to people afterwards, and maybe those that were less vocal, that actually came to learn something from the talk. And very interesting that they took away the idea of looking at their club and analysing what they did, and looking at ways of breaking up the traditional structure of a club, if you like, to make sure that they service their communities maybe for one thing particularly well, or two things particularly well, rather than trying to be all things to all men. And they took a lot of that as a benefit going forward. And I know Richard's hubs not clubs idea in one respect's got a lot of heat from people who seem to think their clubs are doing really, really well, but on the flip side, you can actually see that those clubs that are doing really well, most of them are actually already specialising and probably on the way to being hubs if they're not hubs already. So in some respects, they sort of backed up his point, didn't they, in some respects?
Yeah. And interestingly, there was another club mentioned, we're doing really well, but got X members. But then when they actually said there were actually very few active members, it was the same people doing the same thing. So, it's a very hard decision to make. And I think people take it as a personal failing if a club, is decreasing in size, but you have expertise, and I still think that you could have expertise and roll those expertise in with another club who's got another set of expertise, and you'll give a better response to the public and your members.
Yeah, no, agree entirely. So, guys, if you've not checked out that session, I say it's on the last episode. I say it's there for you in audio. You can go visit YouTube and watch the beautiful Chris and Martin in glorious Technicolor orange shirts. Say talk about that discussion, and I say certainly is there for you to check out. Well, as we wrap things up now for show number 311, just one thing left to do: the very important cup of tea and a chocolate biscuit.
Yeah, certainly is. Your mum will be in from work soon. And she's already saying, counting the time down till she can retire, which I think is bad, because she's, wishing her life away. But in fairness, we'll have that cup of tea and a biscuit for her when she comes in, and have a chat with her as well. So there you go, Colin.
No problems at all. Well, guys, we'll bid you all 73s, and we'll catch up again in a fortnight's time. 73s all.
73.